No. Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Christina Cardona. I am the book selection committee coordinator of the Community Book Connection. And our book for the year is On Earth, We're Briefly Gorgeous by Ocean Vuong. So we're having a lot of programming related to LGBTQ plus themes that are in the book. And this is co-led by Classy, the Committee of LGBTQ plus Advocacy, Support, and Inclusion, which includes Maury, Baskerville, and myself. And we are here with librarians Jean Boggs and Leanne Carpenter to talk about books that are banned and what that means. Before they start, I wanted to let you know at the end of this meeting, I will share a link for a survey. Please answer the survey. Any student that fills the survey will be entered to win a raffle with gift certificates as prizes. Thank you, and you can take it away, Leanne.
All right, thank you. So I can't see the chat. So if something comes up in the chat, or I
will
see it
monitor that for you. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. So my name is Leanne Carpenter. I'm a librarian at the Essex and Dundalk campuses of CCBC. I've been here almost a year. November will be a year. And Jean asked for volunteers, and I told her that I would help her with this presentation. So it's called Reading the Rainbow, Protecting the Freedom and Access to LGBTQ plus content. So I want to start with a quiz. I haven't given a quiz in a long time, so I thought it would be fun. So I want you to answer this, and then I'll tell you the answer. When did the first book ban occur in the United States? It was actually in 1637 in Quincy, Massachusetts. It was Thomas Morton's New English Canon was banned because it questioned Puritan customs and power structures. Question number 2. The Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals allowed which state's anti-LGBTQ plus book ban to go into effect last week? And I'm sure all of you knew the answer to that. It was Texas. A 3-judge panel on the appeals court neither offered an explanation for its decision nor any ruling on its constitutionality. The law also requires bookstores to rate the sexual content within any books they sell to public schools. Books with such content will either be restricted or banned. And then the last question. Which state Supreme Court ruled this week that, actually it was last week, that judges are required to respect people's pronouns in court? And again, I'm sure you all know the answer to that. It was Michigan in a 5-2 vote. They ruled that all judges in the state must respect the pronouns of the parties that come before their court. And there was an interesting quote from Justice Elizabeth Welch that said, "We serve the entire public and are required to treat those who come before us with civility and respect. The gender identity of a member of the public is a part of their individual identity, regardless of whether others agree or approve." And I thought that with all the negativity, that was definitely a step in the right direction. So I'm going to talk just a minute about censors and censorship. Who are censors and what do they do? Originally, the word censor, it originated in ancient Rome, where the government appointed officials to take the census and to supervise public morals. Censorship happens whenever some people succeed in imposing their political or moral values on others by suppressing words, images, or ideas that they find offensive. Now, Webster defines to censor is to examine in order to suppress or delete anything considered objectionable. So they prejudge things based on what they think is right or wrong, not taking into consideration others' opinions. So it's been around since, censorship has been around since pretty much the beginning of time. In 213 BCE, the Emperor of China called for the burning of all texts that contradicted his preferred version of history, along with more than 400 authors of those texts, which I found that to be very interesting, because that was such a long time ago. And then you think about the current state of affairs. So just so we're clear, censorship is the suppression of ideas and information that some individuals find objectionable. And that could be words, images, ideas. So basically, it comes down to one group thinking they know better than other groups. But I found this to be very interesting, a very interesting quote too, which is very true. Censorship is an act of control driven by a combustible mix of power, privilege, and fear. And the heart of censorship is always to remove the ability of others to make intellectual choices. And I've said that I was a middle school librarian before I retired in 2019. And I had a couple parents challenge a couple of different books. And my first question to them was always, have you read the book? And eventually, depending on the kind of a relationship I had with the parent, we would get around to, if you don't want your child to read it, that's fine, but you don't have the right to tell another parent that their child can't, or that their child can't read it. So in a library setting, there are challenges and bans, and there's a difference. If you challenge something, you're attempting to have that removed or restricted based on your feelings or your thought, if you're challenging a book. But if the decision is made to ban materials, then that's taken, that is taken away, that choice is taken away. And one thing I do have to say that I learned during this, preparing for this, is I never really thought about this, but as book bans soar, a more subtle form of censorship has begun ravaging US libraries, and it's called soft censorship. And a lot of the LGBTQ plus materials are falling prey to this quiet censorship or this soft censorship. And that is, they may be in the library, but they may be in a box in the back, or they may be not displayed. But this has become a consequence of the efforts of well-organized book challenges by religious groups and conservative political organizations like anti-LGBTQ plus and hate groups like Moms for Liberty. Moms for Liberty, as I'm sure you know, advocate against school curricula that refer to LGBTQ plus people. In many who are challenging books or requesting book suppression, they cite religious reasons and claim to be protecting children from sexual content as their main justification. And the publicity around these debates has no doubt empowered more people to justify their anti-LGBTQ plus beliefs. So I want to talk about why LGBTQ plus, sorry, I forgot the plus, why they're important. When I was in middle school, which has been a very, very long time ago, because that's as a member of the LGBTQ plus community, I'm very aware of all of the things that are happening, and I get quite depressed about a lot of it. But I can remember when I was in middle school, late middle school, early high school, when I first began to realize that my sexual orientation, and there were no books available for me to identify. There was nobody that I could identify with. And I think it's very important that people see themselves in books. The freedom to read stories about people of diverse sexual and gender identities can validate and empower youth, especially those that identify as LGBTQ+. I met, along those same lines, I met Jason Reynolds several years ago, or a few years ago, and the reason he became a writer is because he said when he was in school, there were not very many books that he could identify in the characters in those books. But I often think about how my life would have been a little bit different had I had books to read that contained characters that I could identify with. Because I think that's so, so, so important in our lives. So that's why they're important. They're important because people need to see, people need to be able to read. And if you're not a member of the LGBTQ plus community, but if you're an ally, or if you're just an avid reader, it's important for you to read those books too, because we read about all kinds of things, and that's how we broaden our horizons. That's how our world becomes bigger, and that's how we learn to empathize with one another, because everybody's got something, and we need to learn about everybody, and there, because everybody has a story. And I think for too long the LGBTQ plus community we've been suppressed in more than one way, and through literature we are able to empower others, and share our stories with others. And I think that is so, so, so important. However, they're restricted a lot of times, and they're challenged. And we know that these times that we are living in, we hear it almost every day. There's another challenge about, there's another book that's being challenged that contains LGBTQ plus material. But this is based on people's opinions and what they think. It's based on bias. It's based on fear. It's based on misinformation. The intolerance of LGBTQ plus stories reflect a bias towards cisgendered and heterosexual perspectives, and against more nuanced understanding of family and gender roles. You see this in healthcare. You see this in every aspect of our society. People think that their way is the only way, and they want to impose those things on other people. Even in our legislatures in the states, in Alabama, Louisiana, Mississippi, Oklahoma, South Carolina, and Texas, there are anti-gay laws governing school curriculums that prohibit promoting homosexuality or presenting same-sex issues in a positive light. Now, this isn't the only thing this is happening to, but this is very important for our community. Well, I'm flying through this faster than I thought I would. So these two books, the first one's Gender Queer. This is #1 on the American Library Association's list of the most challenged books. It has had 151 challenges because of the LGBTQIA plus content, and is claimed to be sexually explicit. I don't know if you've read this book, but it is a really good book. It's very touching. And I actually heard an interview with a woman who had originally protested against this book, but she'd never read it. And then when she read the book, she felt horrible because this was somebody's life, because this is a memoir. So if you haven't read this book, please read it. And then the second book, number 2 book on ALA's list, is All Boys Aren't Blue. It's had 86 challenges for the same reason, for the LGBTQIA plus content, and it's claimed to be sexually explicit. Again, look at the title, A Memoir Manifesto. And if you don't know this author, look him up, because it's very impressive. I'm very impressed by both of these books. Now, I did a screenshot of this. This is from January 1st and August 31st of this year. This is the preliminary data, and I only singled out Maryland because that's where we are. There were 531 attempts to censor books from January 1st to August 31st. And the number of titles that were challenged in those attempts, 3,923. But when you look in Maryland, specifically, 66 titles challenged in 10 attempts to restrict access to books, which I have to tell you, I'm not from Maryland, obviously, if you couldn't tell by my Southern speech. I was a little shocked at this, because, everybody keeps telling me that, Maryland's a blue state, Maryland's a blue state. So I was a little shocked that 66 titles were challenged in only 10 attempts, because that seems like a lot to me. But there are other states that have more. For example, look how dark Texas is. I should have gotten those numbers.
Leanne?
Yes.
I just wanted to say that the ALA is the American Library Association.
Oh, yeah. Sorry, yeah.
Yes. So we have a professional code of ethics as part of being a librarian that we are to, and I think you have this later, but part of our purpose in being librarians is to protect freedom of speech and to be anti-censorship, much in the way the doctors take a Hippocratic oath. Librarians have a similar set of values that we are asked to uphold.
Right. Thank you, Jean. And yeah, I'm very nervous, if you can't tell. And in upholding those, there are, and I know everybody has heard there are throughout the country, there are people who, librarians who their jobs are being threatened, because of what we do believe about intellectual freedom. I can't see the chat, so. And now it won't let me.
It's quiet.
Yeah, you don't have anything in the chat except for Jean's comment, which she just vocalized.
Okay. So how can we defend the LGBTQIA plus books? Well, we can talk like an ally. We can walk like an ally. One of the most effective ways to change attitudes towards these books is to destigmatize LGBTQ plus experiences through our everyday speech and actions, talking openly and kindly about the LGBTQ plus issues, and demonstrating inclusivity. I know here at Essex, and I'm pretty sure at Dundalk too, I know Jill has the sticker, the safe place sticker, on the window, on the door out there, and on her door. People need to know that there's a safe place. We can start a conversation on social media and share our views on the educational importance of LGBTQ plus stories. If a book is challenged in your community, you can work with that organization or library to organize a forum where community members can be heard and we can amplify voices that might be silenced or marginalized, especially those of students and LGBTQ plus community members. Without our allies, this would be a much harder fight. So thank you to those allies that that hang with us.
And Leanne, the allies who have those stickers have undergone the safe space training.
Right.
And our colleague Katie York has put a link to the safe space training in the chat, the list of allies. But that is a training that CCBC faculty and staff can do. Can students do it? Anyone know?
I don't know.
We don't know, but okay. For CCBC faculty and staff, it's a training to help be sure that you are well versed in the issues and concerns of our LGBTQIA community.
I mean, I don't know if students can take it, but I think that would be a good idea.
Jen just wrote that yes, students have participated in the past and can.
Oh, good.
Great.
Good.
Thank you.
We can protest and petition. Real change requires action. We can write to the school or library officials to defend the value of challenged books. We could start an online petition to return any books that have been removed or restricted because of their viewpoint. We can attend meetings, board meetings, commissioner meetings where book challenges are discussed and invite others to join you with signs that advocate for freedom of expression. We can write letters to the editor of the local paper. There are lots of things that we can do here on campus as we do already. One thing that I know that's very different, the social media can impact things both negatively but also positively. And I think if we're keeping the message positive about LGBTQ plus stuff online, that will get us a lot farther than responding to and trying to argue with the negativity that's out there. We can look up and strengthen the school policies on freedom of expression. So do I have no idea if the schools around the public schools, do they have policies? I would assume that they do to handle these kinds of things. Does your school district protect LGBTQ plus expression? You could check the websites for that. The best policies prevent officials from removing or restricting content without committee review of its educational merits. A book should never be restricted because someone says they dislike it or consider it inappropriate.
We have a comment on the chat. Are you aware of ongoing book banning in Carroll County Public Schools? ALA and MLA are protesting it.
Yes, I think there were 16 titles that they were talking about. And I should have included that in here, but I found an article about that and it got the cut. But yes, I am aware of that. And I think if I remember correctly, there were 16 titles that they were offended by and were challenging.
So Katie York just posted a link to a news article from CBS that says more than 50.
Oh, wow. Okay. All right. Well, I was wrong. And again, my question always is, how many of these books have you actually read? Because I think that's a large part of it. We can reach out to agencies that promote the freedom to read. And here's a list of them. I'm not going to read them to you because these are all agencies that promote freedom to read. And there, see, I have it, Jean, American Library Association. the First Amendment Center and the American Civil Liberties Union. Those are really good as well. But that's not all of them, but that is that are several places that you can that promote the freedom to read.
There are some more comments on the chat. Said, and they fired the head librarian for CCPS, and their board is running the school libraries at this time. And then Hartford County Public Schools having a long list, including some of the ones you mentioned. All of this is in the chat right now.
Chat.
Yes.
So it's, and I'm assuming that this is something new for these areas, because when I did the presentation in the spring, there were not that many challenges that had occurred in Maryland. So it's coming. I mean, it's more rampant now, as we know, are all over the country. One of the best things that we can do is to read freely and to share what we read. And I know that we do that all the time amongst ourselves, but we need to, we need to share out the things that we're reading. Reading banned and challenge books is an act of resistance. You can start a book club in your community and engage your local library. If you need book recommendations, any of those websites that I had would give you the list of banned or challenged books that are being questioned. And the two that I mentioned are going to be on those lists. However, if we check the numbers, even though there are lots of challenges and lots of bans, a large majority of voters, 71%, oppose efforts to have books removed from their local public libraries. Regardless of what political party that you belong to, the majority of voters oppose efforts to have those books removed. Most voters and parents hold their librarians in regard, have high confidence in their local libraries to make good decisions about what books to include. 9 in 10 voters have a favorable opinion of librarians who work in local public libraries and school libraries. And 8 in 10 voters do say their librarians do a good job of offering books that represent a variety of viewpoints. I know I've been in 2 of our local public libraries and have seen banned book tables and banned book sections, which I think is, and they during June, they also had the Pride book display set up, which I think is excellent. And 3 in 4 voters are confident in local public libraries to make good decisions about what books to include. However, there are more and more articles every day about how they are taking away the rights of librarians or the choice of librarians to order books that they deem appropriate. Yeah, I just see the chat. Yeah.
Yeah, there's some comments on the chat here just saying that this happened this summer and that HCPS is due to change in school board members.
Is that for the better, or are they changing the ones that are?
No, for the worse. And it's also happened this summer.
And one thing I think it's important to note in these numbers, I mean, it's that these minorities are loud. The book banning folks are a minority in many cases, not all, but in many cases, but they're very loud. And so, often that's when you will see the soft bans, like, things kind of get swept under the rug, or to avoid conflict, or to keep funding, or, just avoided an all out fight over things. Yeah.
Yeah, because I've seen some school board meetings online. I've watched some, and they can get nasty.
Mm-hmm.
And there's another comment here. Yes, and a lot in Hartford as not even parent or guardian of current public school students.
Mm-hmm.
And they're not even parent or guardian. That's what I say. Sorry.
So they don't have a child in that school system, but they are
Challenging the books anyway.
Affecting curriculum and yeah. Mm-hmm.
So, but I'm sure that there is a fight against that in both of those counties, Carroll County and Harford County. At least I'm sure there is. Yeah. Why would you? Well, never mind. I was going to say, if you don't have the old saying, if you don't have a dog in the fight. Okay. That's another story. So I will say that
we have a few more chat. Sorry to interrupt, but we have a few more comments here. The bluest eye is on the list of banned. And so I always teach my students that LGBTQ issues are also racial issues, as systems of oppression intersect and depend on each other. Freedom and access is also under attack for CRT. Sorry, for some reason it's not letting me see all the literature that addresses our history and our highly racialized society today. The Bluest Eye was a book that changed me fundamentally in my youth and lit my interest in writing. Yeah. And the other comment says I guess in response to the previous comments, there are, but we can always use more rational-minded folks.
Yeah. Yes. Always. But hadn't that been true throughout history? So to me, the bottom line for all of this, it's the human condition. And I was going to play this clip, but I decided not to play it. I decided just to read it. But throughout history, whenever people have felt threatened or feel fearful, they have attempted to use whatever perceived power they have to deal with it. And the LGBTQ plus community is one group that has been targeted and continues to be targeted through book challenges and bans and through laws that threaten intellectual freedom. And it's the human condition. And if you watch the movie A Time to Kill, Matthew McConaughey's closing speech at his trial, it doesn't address LGBTQ plus, but it addresses the human condition, which I think we could all learn from. And he says, supposedly we are all equal in the eyes of the law, but that's not the truth, because the eyes of the law are human eyes, yours and mine. And until we can see each other as equals, justice is never going to be even-handed. It will remain nothing more than a reflection of our own prejudices. So until that day, we have a duty to seek the truth, not with our eyes and not with our minds, where fear and hate turn commonality into prejudice, but with our hearts, where we don't know better. And there was a lot more that I could have put in this, and I probably should have, because I didn't think I was going to have enough time. But I thank you for your attention, and I thank you for giving me this opportunity. And that's the end. If there are any questions or comments, I'm sure Jean and I would be more than willing to answer them. Jean, can you talk about the book for a minute?
Yes. So I had some content that, unfortunately, maybe we can do a part deux for the librarians' comments on the book. But one of the things that really struck me as I read this book was how, if sections of it were removed from the context of the story, it could be argued that it is inappropriate for a certain age group, or right, or just inappropriate for academic study. But when you are reading the book the memories and the imagery and, and even the detailed sexual content, it interleaves to tell the story of human beings. I mean, human beings are sexual beings. Human beings are imprinted as well by our lives, and so those things blend and blur into each other. And so as I read it, I mean, the writing is absolutely masterful and beautiful.
Yes.
And this would be one of those books where I, kept thinking of what you were saying, Leanne, like anyone who could read this book and think, oh, this is just, pornographic, blah, blah, blah. They didn't read it with an open mind and heart because there's so many other things.
Right.
How Little Dog and Trevor feel this kind of self-loathing, even, with the drug abuse and the, and so you're not feeling compassionate. You're not a compassionate reader as you read. And so if you don't understand that, and so, oh, okay, so we have a question. We'll get to that. But also there was a really lovely analogy that my colleague Jen Ditkoff said to me. It's an article, and I did find it, about reading as windows or mirrors. And so reading can be a reflection. It can be a mirror of ourselves. And it can also be a window into a different part of ourselves and a different world, or an intersectionality as well. So yes, someone said in the chat, and thank you, something about the bluest eye and intersectionality. And this book is a masterwork of intersectionality, right? I mean,
yes,
all of the different stories woven together about race and gender and, being an immigrant and class and white supremacy, or the fact that Trevor lives in the country, so he has a certain kind of latitude. I mean, it's very interesting. But then also that white supremacy comes with some baggage about what the proper male behavior is in this kind of white supremacist society that Trevor's raised in. So it's just, I think it's just a rich tapestry of intersectionality in the book, in the read. And I just yeah, because that was kind of what I wanted to talk about.
Yeah,
and
for you.
What?
Sorry, Jean, we have a few questions for you, and one of them was Jill just wrote that she missed the title of the book that you're referring to right now.
Oh, I'm sorry. It's our read. It's our On Earth We're Briefly Gorgeous.
On Earth We're Briefly Gorgeous.
That's what I assumed, but it's the CBC book for the year is On Earth We're Briefly Gorgeous by Ocean Vuong, which has a lot of very serious and like she mentioned, intersectional issues that are vital for and relevant and current and important with this discussion of freedom of speech. We have other questions here. So someone said, when you say challenging these books, is that like protesting or banning? And someone responded banning and protesting. Another question is, how would you respond to a person who says they don't believe in banning books, but they just don't think they're appropriate for school libraries? Or those who want the school to implement some sort of rating system to keep graphic material out of younger students' hands?
Sorry, I'm rereading the question. Well, I think I would Jean, please jump in anytime, or anybody else can jump in for that matter. They don't believe in banning books, but they don't think they're appropriate for school libraries. Well, I think the librarians that order the books, that choose the books. I think they are the experts on what's for they're buying for their collection. They know their students. They know, you know, what to buy for theirs. I mean, they're the ones that are. I think if you have to trust your school librarian or your librarians to purchase the materials that are appropriate for that level. I mean, obviously you're not going to put, Looking for Alaska by John Green in a third grade classroom. I mean, you have to, there are, that's why the librarians are the experts in their field. Lawn Boy. Oh, I was just
comment here. HCPS board members and county council members are questioning books they find offensive. 2 books have been allegedly pulled from the school libraries: Lawn Boy and another unnamed book for review. Yeah.
Yeah, Lawn Boy was that's on the list as well.
Well,
And Alexis,
so go ahead, sorry.
oh, good. Well, Alexis Mercado had a question, and just wanted to review that challenging versus protesting or banning. So challenging is when someone raises an objection to a book.
Oh, I see.
And would like it restricted or removed. Banning is the actual implementation of that challenge. And when a book is then removed from shelves, removed from libraries. Did I say that correctly, Leanne?
Yes. They banning means they take it out of the library or take it out of that collection, and no one has access to it. If they're just challenging it, that means they're questioning the content in it, making a judgment that it's not, their judgment that it's not appropriate. But if they ban it, they remove it from the collection. Someone asked me once, does that mean that I can't read it somewhere else? And no, that just means for that particular library, or they pull it from that particular library, but it's still available in other arenas, other libraries.
Of course, making it more difficult to get, and especially if someone is a minor and is seeking this out, it could definitely make things harder. And in response to your question, Katie, I think that in schools it may be a little different than in public libraries. About I think there's a lot that libraries do about context, like where we place things. And I'm not talking about, I actually worked in a library. It was very funny because it was an art school, and we had an area that was supposed to be for rare books. It was like a metal wrought iron, and it was literally called the Cage, which I think is pretty funny. And it was supposed to be for rare books. So we had some rare editions, and we had a first edition of The Raven, and illustrated by Gustav Doré, and all kinds of really cool stuff in there. But at some point, there was a librarian who put anything risque. So photographs by Mapplethorpe, which are suggestive, kind of homoerotic photographs from the 80s, that he lost his funding, his national arts funding, because of these photographs. So, but there was a librarian who had started to put things back there. And then when I came, I said something to the head librarian, like, do you know, like, that's not what the Cage is supposed to be. Yeah. It's supposed to be an area that just protects rare books from theft. And so we ended up doing a little project where we checked some of these titles to see if they were actually rare, or did a librarian And that's against our ethics, against our code. But some librarian had a personal issue or concern and created this context. Okay. So, but typically a librarian who's kind of operating within the ALA ethics, we may create context. So we wouldn't put something that would have content that you wouldn't teach a third grader in the books with their reading level. So often it's by Lexile level, which can have its problems as well, right? Because some people are adults but a low Lexile level, which Lexile level meaning,
Right.
You know, your reading skill. But it at least starts to shape who would come in contact with a certain.
Jean, you're coming in and out a little bit.
I'm sorry.
Well, I think the point that she's making there at the end was, you know, the like the Lexile level, a child, a third grader may have a very high level, Lexile level, but you're not going to put a book that has mature content, even though it might fit in that Lexile level, you're not going to put that book in that particular place for that student. Is that what you're saying, Jean?
Yes, thank you. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
I'll speak up. Thank you.
There's something else in the chat now. I feel pretty strongly about public school libraries for a number of reasons, but they need our support. Our public library in Hartford has a great collection and have been open to suggestions for items to purchase by the students in K-12 for the students in K-12 system. They may be able to access public library as easily as their school library.
They may not be able to.
Yeah, for some reason, some of the words are cutting off in my view. They also may not feel safe going to public library with guardian if the student is questioning their gender identity or sexuality and are not sure about their adult.
That's true. I mean, that's definitely it's definitely an issue. The getting to a public library, if your school, especially if your school library has removed a book that you're interested in reading, you don't have transportation, or if you are questioning and you're very uncomfortable, you're not ready to come out. We don't know, there might be other issues going on. So it's a very tough situation. Hopefully those students have someone that they can talk to.
Thank you. Is there anyone else have any questions that would like to voice, either by chat or raising their hand?
I do want to comment on the On Earth We're Briefly Gorgeous. It is one of the most beautifully written books I have read. I love the craft that it's just an excellent, it's very well written. And I saw an interview with him, and he was talking about his mother, and his mother never learned English, never learned to speak English, but she would go to these, whenever he would do a reading somewhere, she would go and sit in the back. And the first time she went, he went back to, after it was over, he went back to see her and she was crying. And he said, I didn't understand because she didn't understand a word I said. But she just knew that it was good. So that was I fell in love with this book when I read it.
Thank you. There's another comment here. If a student can access a public library, Maryland's statewide search Marina is great source if their home collection doesn't have it. I want to thank the presenters, Leanne and Jean. I know Jean was under the weather, but thank you for coming and adding to your personal experiences as well on this. Seeing another comment here. I know some books don't come across as well as audiobooks. I would like to listen to audiobooks and listen to the audiobook of An Earth We're Briefly Gorgeous, and I'm curious if anyone else has listened to it. I only read this one. I did not listen to this one.
I only read it. I haven't listened to it.
I want to also point out that I did. Oh, there's another part here. I know some books don't. Well, no, this is.
I've only listened to.
Sorry. Go ahead, Jean.
I have not listened to it. I just would say, like, people are individual as to how. I am more visual, like when I'm reading for things like there's a lot of analogy, there's a lot of kind of repetition of imagery and so on. So, but that doesn't mean it wouldn't be a good audiobook. It just means that as a listener, I don't think I would have caught all of the things that I caught reading it on the page. But people have different strengths. So
yeah, I think it all depends on
people listening.
Yeah.
Might do.
Yeah, I think it depends on what kind of reader you are. But I agree with you, Jean. There are some books that I can listen to pretty easily.
Yes.
But there are other books that, yeah, I need it in my hand and I need it. I need to see it, because with this book in particular, I would read something. I'd read a paragraph and I'd have to stop and say, okay, wait a minute, and I'd have to go back and reread the paragraph. You know, because I just wanted to grasp what he was saying.
There's another comment. I read and listened to the book, and it was okay as an audio.
It's
yeah. I do want to say I did post already on the link, but I'm going to resubmit it now. Please, if you have a moment, just click on the link and answer a very, very short survey about this event, just so we can continue programming like this at the Community Book Connection. Thank you, Leanne, and thank you, Jean, for being here, and our ASL interpreters, Audrey and Molly. I appreciate you being here as well. And if anyone has any questions and wants to learn more about the Community Book Connection, what you can do and submit your work on Showcase, please contact me at ccardona@ccbcmd.edu, which I'm going to put on the chat as well. But I think unless there's any more questions, we can end here. You're getting a lot of compliments and on the chat.
Thank you, Christina. I was on the struggle bus for a little bit, but yeah, it's all good.
You did really well.
No,
I appreciate your work here.